Welcome back to On the Road to UNCCD COP16. Today we're looking at Finance Day. Finance Day is designed to help engage and involve financial stakeholders, raise awareness of the needs, gaps, and opportunities for financing the land and drought resilience agenda, showcase successful and innovative financial mechanisms and instruments, and leverage effective partnerships to mobilize new financing for flagship initiatives. Today, we're going to unpack how to bridge this significant funding gap with two incredible leaders in the field. I'm honored to welcome Louise Baker, Managing Director of the Global Mechanism of the UNCCD, and Carlos Manuel Rodríguez, CEO and Chair of the Global Environment Facility. Together, they'll explore how we can align policies, create an enabling environment for private investment, and rethink economic systems to truly value land and reward sustainable practices. With that, let me turn it over to Louise to kick off our conversation.
Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome Carlos Manuel Rodríguez. I love your statement about yourself on the Jeff website. Lawyer by profession, politician by choice, and conservationist at heart. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Louise. The pleasure is mine.
Wonderful. So Carlos Manuel, you've been the chairperson at the Global Environment Facility since June 2020, I think, and had lots of interactions since then. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you in Riyadh. I know that you need no introduction to the people who are listening in today. So can we dive straight in?
Please, happy to do it.
Wonderful. Because really, I mean, financing land restoration and drought resilience is going to be a big part of the upcoming COP16 discussions. I think you, in fact, inspired us, and then the parties instructed us to carry out a needs assessment for the full implementation of the convention, and that's going to be launched early in the COP discussions. The financing needs that were identified were quite large, in the range of $1 billion a day. So the parties to UNCCD definitely have bold ambitions to combat land degradation and drought. And from our side, we definitely think Jeff has got a vital role to play in now mobilizing that finance, bridging the financing gap that's certainly very large. So maybe as a sort of kickoff question, what role do we think that Jeff is going to be playing in helping us either mobilize that money or deliver on that paradigm shift that's needed?
Well, thank you so much, Louise. That is a very good question, because we are very close to the 2030 targets within the Rio Conventions and beyond the Rio Conventions, particularly the SDGs, in our commitment to really generate a balance within human systems and nature. And as we look into the past, I will say that we have done a lot of progress on multiple fronts, not just on land degradation, but the international conventions. And when we have this unique year where we have the three COPs of the three Rio Convention, this is the moment for us to really understand how do we integrate ourselves much better across the conventions, at the same time that we're doing the same effort in terms of national investments. At the end of the day, we all understand that land and land use are extremely important, not just because of socio-economic benefits to people, but it's in the center of what we need to do in terms of dealing with the triple planetary crisis. I mean, land degradation, loss of biodiversity, and climate change are divided in conventions because of political decisions, not based on science. And in a year like this one, and for us, the financial mechanism of this convention is a year of thinking towards the future on how we can have long-lasting impacts, better results, and a better understanding on how we narrow the gaps in terms of funding, but also actions with regards to the Rio Conventions. And I strongly believe that UNCCD is in the center of actions, as we all understand that we need to deal with, the human systems that produce our food, where we live and produce our energy, with nature. So it was very interesting. I'm just coming from Cali, CBD COP, and there was a very interesting decision whereby parties at the CBD agree to bring together biodiversity and climate change in terms of national actions and policies. So I see that we are integrating much better across the conventions and on the financial elements. I can talk a lot about the benefits of more integrated, more comprehensive approaches. But I think that, the work that we have done together, the Jeff and UNCCD is something extremely important. We've been able to mobilize more than $5 billion with a lot of co-finance in many many countries, still, Louis, we don't move the needle. We don't move the needle for reasons that I would love to explain today.
Very good. I think let's focus in on that moving the needle. I think that's brilliant. The synergies agenda, very, very definitely critical. I'm loving this Rio Trio branding that's now emerging. Land, I think, has failed to necessarily make its voice be heard, and hopefully COP16 will be a chance to make that happen. But in any case, the sort of national investments, the international finance won't be enough. We're going to have to shift the needle, as you said. What does that look like? How are we going to be shifting the needle? How do we bring about that paradigm shift?
You know, the 30 years of investment in more than 700 countries, $5 billion has gave us a lot of learned lessons. And one has to do with the fact that, yes, we can put together innovative projects that catalyze technology development, best practices, stakeholders engagement. I mean, we understand our business. What we haven't been able is to scale that up in ways that change the system, in this case, a food system, most probably, that is damaging nature and compromising the future of humans. And I strongly believe that limit us to move the needle are two important elements. One has to do with economics. And this is something that we all have been working for more than a decade. We understand that there's a market failure. Those who do good with nature and natural resources doesn't receive a financial reward for that. And those who damage nature are not assuming the cost of that. As a matter of fact, the system, this neoclassic economic system, socializes the environmental cost of the productive sector. I mean, you pollute the river, and downstream you got people who are going to be affected. The one who pollutes the river doesn't assumes the cost of pollution above or beyond the legal standard, and the market failure is a big issue. That is why REDD Plus and other initiatives, payment for environmental services and specific incentives are trying to turn around a little bit and create positive incentives for the good use of natural resources. We all know that there's a lot of perverse incentives and subsidies that also add complexities to this element. I mean, in CBD, the Global Biodiversity Target, there's a framework, and the Target 18 says that we need to go from negative incentives into positive one, and we understand very well the negative impacts of subsidies. Some subsidies are very good, well done. It is a process of, in the agricultural land use sector, there's a lot of subsidies that do good. So what we need to do is really repurpose many of those. So there's a market failure there that is not helping us, and we need to create the policy conditions so we level the playing field, so those who generate a negative externality should pay for it, and those who provide a positive externality, fixing carbon, protecting water, protecting the soils, should receive a reward because they do generate an environmental service and somebody's being benefited. So the market is failing to reflect that, the costs and the benefits. But I think that can be solved in the next decade, and that will give us scale. The second element, Louise, that I believe that we struggle is the institutional failure. We have created agencies at the level of the executive branch to solve many problems, social problems, financial problems, education, health, and you got the ministries, and you got the development agencies from the central government. Here, I think that I believe that we cannot do the leap forward in terms of sustainability. It can be land degradation plans, droughts, it can be sustainable development goals, it can be reverting the rate of deforestation with the same institutional framework that in first place has created the problem. Because the problem of land use change, deforestation, erosion, drought has to do with policies that comes from those agencies. And if we have too many agencies managing natural resources with different ideas at the level of the executive branch, what you have is lack of political coherence. So the central government national development plans and budgets are still financing activity that goes against our aspiration to revert land degradation and drought. And to be specific, the complexities, the political complexities within the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Environment in every single country is a major challenge to us. So I believe that we need to do major changes in the executive branch. I think that we need to change agencies. Why do we have a Ministry of Agriculture managing natural resources or biodiversity and a Ministry of Environment doing similar things in the same landscape with the same people? agriculture works with domesticated biodiversity, ministries of environment with wild biodiversity in the same sites with the same stakeholders. So it doesn't make to me in terms of integration, in terms of results, in terms of moving the needle to have agencies that have big conflict. And many ministers of environment doesn't know what an NBSAP is. The NBSAP is the National Biodiversity Action Plan from CBD. Since policies coming from the agricultural sector, the main driver of deforestation, and deforestation is the biggest threat to biodiversity, at least the ministries of agriculture of all countries should know what NBSAPs are. So these are a couple of examples of the institutional failure, and the GEF is beginning to invest in that, and in GEF 9, the next replenishment will program big time, and I will be happy to share some of the ideas so the GEF can do more of a comprehensive whole of a government approach in our investment at the country level.
Fascinating. Picking up on that a little bit, I think that's right on NBSAPs. It's certainly true on the LDN targets that UNCCD has been working on. So I certainly think we need to bring those strands together. What I'm hearing from you here is that the sort of political signals that governments are giving to the private sector are sort of falling short. So as we move into this sort of institutional reform, all of government approach, there's the incentive signals that you're talking about, but how ambitious do you think we can be in terms of not just engaging the private sector in terms of projects, but using the private sector as a driver of scaling up?
That's a very good question, Louise. And having been myself in the executive branch, I can tell you that policy development is not a straight line. It's not easy. It's not a straight line. When you say that the government hasn't created the right policies so the private sector can be on the driving seat of sustainability, that is because the private sector influences the government in not doing the changes because they are being benefited by these unsustainable patterns of consumption and production. I mean, look at what is happening in the oil and gas sector or the other convention. I mean, the oil and gas companies are lobbying big time against decisions to phase out the use of fossil fuels. So policy development is not linear. And here in this sector, yes, agricultural companies, small, medium, and large, national and transnational, are concerned about the system food needs for change. And at this point, there is a lot of lobby. I mean, look at the lobby that the agricultural sector does when the discussion of subsidies to the agricultural sector happens. It's not just in France, it's also in Uruguay. It is very challenging. So addressing this issue is not an issue of having enlightened politicians in the public sector that will create with a magic bar the right framework so the private sector can align themselves. It is a long process of negotiation. That long process of negotiation needs champions, needs good data, needs good plans, and I think that we're not close to be there. At this point, the political system doesn't work on our benefit because political cycles are short, 4 or 5 years, a government, and there will be some political costs associated to these changes. Let me give you an example of what I mean, Louise. If we want to really level the playing field so the private sector can be a good, strong force of positive actions in our effort of sustainability, we need to change the way that we do national accounting. National accounting, we need to fully internalize land degradation, erosion as part of the loss of our natural capital, and that should be reflected in the GDP. But when you do that, the first time you need to fully reflect that, and on average, countries lose around 4% of their GDP because of their natural capital. So the Minister of Finance, who has very clear indication and targets on growth, if you ask him to fully internalize the environmental costs of the productive sector in their country, that means that their growth projections will disappear and he will be in a technical recession. A minister of finance will never accept that because he will lose his job immediately, and most probably he will lose his political career by fully internalizing in a new methodology the environmental costs. So these are the kind of very specific challenges that we're confronted, because in theory, in a paper, everything looks, logic, but go to the front line of political actions in national congresses, go to the meetings of the chambers of the private sector, things are much more complicated. That's why I'm saying, policy development is not linear.
Very good. So as we go into Jeff 9 opening, I mean, I know we're going to Saudi at the end of December, and that'll be the last COP before you start the process of Jeff 9 replenishment. And I know that we need this financing the transition, this transition plan really in place. But at COP, we're going to have a lot of private sector players. We're going to have a lot of ministries of finance, a very broad group of stakeholders. What does Jeff Council, what does the Jeff partners, the Jeff stakeholders need to hear coming out of COP as they start thinking about Jeff 9?
Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit the vision for the future in terms of the Jeff. We at the Jeff, we understand that we will never achieve our mandate, which is generate global environmental benefit, if we only work with one stakeholder out of many stakeholders that are part of the solution. Today, the Jeffs, everybody says that the Jeff works with the countries, but we don't work with the countries. We work with the government. But when you look in your microscope, we don't even work with the government. We work with the ministries of environment. And this is what we've been doing. You know, the operational focal point, the political focal point of the countries to the Jeff are the ones who decide on how to use the Jeff resources. And they are normally in the ministries of environment. So what we have done is working with the ministers of environment. We never work with the ministers of agriculture or energy, finance or planning. We don't work in Congress. We work little at the subnational level, and we work marginally with civil society. And all of them are part of the solutions. So the Jeff should be the mechanism that finance everyone who is part of the solution. This is, Louise, a change of paradigm for the Jeff, because we've been working just with ministries of environment. So this is the ideas that we have for the next replenishment. We will propose to change the operational focal point structure. Now we would like to see like a steering committee where you got finance, planning, energy, agriculture, and environment. Within themselves, they decide on how to use the Jeff resources. This is already being done by some countries that came up with this decision based on the same rationale that we have here at the Jeff. More integration, more impact. That's one element. The second element is that we normally believe that the biggest outcome that we can achieve at the COP level, or in terms of implementing actions coming from the COP, is when you got the okay from the minister. I will implement my land degradation plan, okay? But for that to happen at the national level, domestically, many of these ministers, they need to go with laws and proposals to national congresses, and nobody helps them over there. As a matter of fact, many of the big failures that we have as a system for sustainability, the failure happens in the interface of the executive branch trying to enhance policies, change laws, or whatever, new frameworks or incentives. So the Jeff looks to work closer, and when I say work, I'm saying putting financial resources, work closer in the interface of national congresses and the executive branch. And this can be done through many different mechanisms, working directly with congressmen, congresswomen, civil society, many. That's the second element. The third element is going directly at the subnational level. It is about time that Jeff bring resources directly without going through the executive branch directly. This is very challenging because of the political elements associated to the change, directly to governors and mayors. I believe that, local politicians, local governments are in a good position to really understand the issues. Yes, of course, there's an issue of capacity. There are many issues associated, but this is a long-term investment and we need to go that way. This is what I call the Jeff whole of a government approach. And then on the other side, as I'm explaining you, the need to financially support every single stakeholder that must be part of the sustainability solution is working with civil society and private sector. The Jeff already has a very interesting fund, $250 million, that is available to private sector to do innovative, wow things that nobody, because of the high risk, is willing to finance. With the Jeff, we got this high risk appetite in our effort to bring new approaches and new technologies and new ways to solve the problem problems. And on the other side, civil society, a non-for-profit organization. I mean, in UNCCD, we got a very active civil society, and we are financing activities. We got a medium-sized project with UNCCD civil society. I want to see how that project is going, because that is the kind of initiatives that we want to do. We want to finance the participation activities and actions that civil society does, complementary to what governments do in the conventions.
Thank you so much. Carlos Manuel Rodríguez, thank you so much for joining us. We have exciting times ahead of us at COP and as we enter 2025 for JEF9 replenishment. We look forward to seeing you in Riyadh, and I'm sure there'll be lots more conversations to have over there.
See you in Riyadh. Thank you so much, Louise.